think I applied and I was like, I have it as an agent. So like,
Took him over to Intel. We are really
There are a few Slido Q&A questions. There's one saying I can't register the Zoom link. Where's the Zoom link? Do you want me to forward that or?
Sure, I guess. Yeah, because I cut off registration just to kind of have a clean cutoff. Hello.
hi, Marshall family, Marshall Fire family, we're all together. Thank you everyone for coming. My name is Renee. I work for the Superior Chamber, but I'm also a member of Superior Rising. So this event tonight is put on by Superior Rising and Marshall together. And I want to let you all know that your voices, we are recording tonight, so your voices may be recorded. So just know that, not your face or anything like that, but if there's any discussion, be aware. And first of all, thank you all for coming to the Superior Chamber's Temporary Business Center. This is a place for everyone here who's displaced in any way affected by the fire. Come here to print documents. We have Wi-Fi, we have computers. This is a great meeting space. You can meet insurance, meet developers, anyone you want to. This is for our community. There's also a table of resources United Policyholders offices out of here, and they leave a lot of their resources, and we can help you fill out your SBA loans and any connection that you may need. And we have free t-shirts, so you're welcome to take a t-shirt. We will have more as they come. But we're very excited about this event, and I want to introduce Raina. She is the board of director and the board for Marshall Together, and she's the one who kind of started all of it. So welcome, Raina.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. And I had to write down some notes because there are so many things that I wanted to share before I introduce Santiana. My name is Raina Pomeroy, and I am on the board of Marshall Together. And I suspect that some of you might be on our Slack. If not, maybe you're on our email list. We're a nonprofit organization with a mission to get folks home after the Marshall fire, whatever that means for individual families. My family and I lost our home in Louisville, and I'm in it very much with the rest of you. And I'm here today to introduce Santiana Hernandez, who is the CEO of the Boulder County Community Foundation. And at the beginning of this recovery, to be really honest, I was trying to understand what the Community Foundation was doing with a large pot of money and that they had raised on quote unquote our behalf. And with a healthy dose of skepticism. Hello. I reached out to the Community Foundation for a meeting and expressed my concerns and frustrations, probably similar to how you might be feeling today. Not to project any feelings on you, but I've heard some of them. It's been very clear to me that Marshall Together Slack, that we have heard a lot of your voices, and so many folks want to understand who the Community Foundation is and what they are doing on our behalf, and perhaps why we haven't received more checks. I wanted to create this opportunity, not that I've done this on my own by any means, because I think it matters how we talk, how we have this conversation. Some of the goals that I have for this meeting, and I hope that Santiana will be able to clear some of these things up for you, are to understand what is happening with the money that has been raised, how it's been allocated so far, and the spirit in which the money is going to be dispersed in the future. I think that's what so many of us are interested in hearing about. I want to share with you that the Community Foundation has us at the center of their decision making. They have invited us to the table many times over and have brought us in from the jump. And to be clear, I have been giving feedback to the Community Foundation that I don't think they've gotten the credit they deserve for the financial allocations they've already made. Have you all heard of the United Policyholders meetings? Those things have been funded by the Community Foundation. So many of the things that we are taking advantage of, hopefully taking advantage of, are coming from there. And you'll probably hear more of these and the investments that are coming to bear. And I'll leave you with this, that Santiana feels our urgency, very much so. And I've had many conversations with her about this, that she's not just sitting back, that she's not just waiting to figure out what's happening. She is in this with us day in and day out. She's heard our pains and the uncertainty about the financial deficits that we're experiencing and the underinsurance that's plaguing our community. She and her team are working around the clock to support the needs that we have. And so with that, I'd like to turn it over to Santiana Hernandez, CEO of Boulder County Community Foundation.
So much. I'm so excited to finally get to hug you. We've been on so many calls together, and to be able to hug you and hug others of you that we've been working for months now in person is a real gift. So thank you first and foremost to the Superior Chamber for hosting us here today, to all of you for joining. I know there's so much on your plates right now in terms of time and navigating systems. It means the world that you took the time to be here with us. I also want to thank everyone at Superior Rising and Marshall Together for co-hosting this with us. It was really important for us as a foundation to first and foremost speak directly with fire survivors, because as Raina said, you have been at the core of our concern and certainly of our decision-making from day one. Maybe we can pop over. I should probably look at my notes. It's kind of wild. It's been less than 90 days since fire broke out in our community. Isn't that hard to believe? It's felt like years. And I know that every single week, it feels like that time is moving at a very odd pace right now. To Raina's point, our sense of urgency has been there since day one. And we are actually, as a community, moving incredibly quickly. So one of the first things we do as a foundation in aftermath of an event like this, we reach out to our partners, right, across the country and say, okay, how did you guys do it in Houston? And how did you guys do it in Sonoma County? What did you guys do after the Dixie Camp fire? And the more we talk to folks, the more I was frankly slightly disappointed with some of the ways that other community foundations did their work. I mean, we had one example where it was 6 months down the road and somebody was doing a community engagement survey. I was like, you gotta be kidding me, guys. We knew immediately, and certainly, I hope you saw this in the immediate aftermath. I'll talk about this a little bit later. Just, that sense of urgency has been there. So as I mentioned, many of you maybe have never heard of the Community Foundation Boulder County before an event like this. Out of curiosity, show of hands, who'd heard about the Community Foundation Boulder County before? Okay, that's more football. Oh, you guys did. But that's a lot more hands than I thought. So I thought we'd start off by talking a little bit about who we are and what we do as work. So slide. There we go. You probably can't read that, but I will try to read it for you. So we've been Boulder County's trusted philanthropic partner for over 30 years. In that 30 years, we've granted over $100 million to support our community. We currently manage over $90 million in assets, and we distribute, this is on a regular year when things don't happen, approximately $10 million, both through our discretionary funds as well as donor advised funds. So at our core, our community foundation is made up of a community of members who hold funds with us, who co-leverage with us, co-invest with us, but we're not just a private foundation kind of I've worked at those places, so I hate to say where I've worked, but we're not one of those foundations that's in a high-rise apartment that's not necessarily connected to community. We live and breathe our community every day. We all live in this community. Frankly, we've been affected ourselves as a foundation in terms of this particular event. But I mention this to say we've gotten tons of experience with not just taking in significant numbers of dollars, but also distributing those dollars in our community. Next slide. So in terms of crisis experience, it is unimaginable that we have now administered 6 crisis funds in our 30-year history, this being the 7th. Some of you who've been in our community for a long time will remember the 2012 fire, followed by the 2013 flood. I'm not going to go into every single one of them. We've had 4 in the last 2 years. And with each example, we learn. We learn a little bit more about how to do it better, how to make it so that it's easy for folks, and how to do this in a way that supports folks comprehensively. And so as unbelievable as it is that our community has suffered so much in such a short amount of time, it has given us the experience to know not only who the partners are, because these are partners that we've been working very closely with for our entire experience, but certainly how to leverage, how to use our power as an organization, frankly, to encourage people to act differently and act quickly in the aftermath of an event like this. Every crisis is different. Every crisis is different. It's a different population of people. There are different needs. There's different structures that get set up in the aftermath. And I think that's important to learn because it's important to remember that the nature of the event itself and the nature of the community really drives the nature of the response. So what is the purpose of charitable dollars, right? And I think this is an important distinction to make. Charitable dollars are intended to fill gaps. There is no amount of philanthropic support that is going to fill the totality of the need in our community, right? FEMA estimates that damages from this event are in the $500 to $600 million. That's total estimates. We know it's going to take everything. It's going to take folks working on collective rebuild efforts to bring the cost of rebuilding per square foot down. We know it's going to take state money to help with green rebuilding efforts. We know it's going to take our rebuilding efforts. It's going to take SBA loans. It's going to take FEMA. It is a full-on barn raising for us to get our community where we want to be. in as quickly of a time frame as we can. So I mentioned that to say we fill gaps in support. What you may not be aware of, and when I say we fill gaps in support, philanthropic dollars are often the last dollars in. There's a reason for that. If we were first dollars in, your insurance companies would take that into consideration and lower your insurance settlement. Okay, I just want to name that. We were just writing checks today, you would get less from your insurance companies. So we are very carefully looking at timelining, making sure that we're aligning with those systems so that we can maximize and leverage supports that you need. Yep. So the other thing I would also mention, we see our work in disaster response as a service to our community. Fundamentally, we are a philanthropic organization. What we know to do and what our expertise in is taking in dollars, distributing dollars. That is our expertise, and frankly, we're one of the few organizations that can handle an event of this magnitude, if not the only organization that can handle an event of this magnitude in our community. And we know how to distribute quickly. So in the last 2 years, some of you may have heard, we were distributing funds for COVID relief. We distributed funds after the Calwood and Left Hand Canyon fires in 2020, and we distributed funds after the King Super shooting. All of those funds, so that just to give you a timeline, in the last 2 years, we had 3 major funds. All of those funds have been expended. COVID took about, I'd say, 2 years to fully expend because that's how long we've been in COVID. The Calwood fire, about a year, same deal, because there was mitigation efforts that kind of had to happen seasonally and things moved that way. And then the crisis fund after the King Super shooting, we actually allocated all of the money in 9 months. So again, well, I say that, but there's still some funding available for folks to do healing events in South Boulder in particular. You know, there's a lot of community reweaving that needs to happen after an event of that level of magnitude. And I would add that this is not a money-making venture for us as an organization. Our administrative fee is really, really low. We really see this as a service to community. We are not financially incentivized in any way to hold on to these funds longer than is necessary. I can get into the specifics of what that means if you'd like me to, but the point is, we don't make more money by holding this longer, okay? And I just want you all to know that. Next slide. Okay, and the other thing I'd want to share, you know, our work is informed by people in our community. And so some of you may have missed this announcement because it came so early in the aftermath of the Marshall Fire, but our advisory committee and some of those members are here, thank you for being here tonight, have been working really tirelessly for the last 3 months to understand, okay, if our role is to fill gaps, what are the needs? B, what are the resources that are already available or will become available? And then C, how do we leverage what we have to build on those funds, to fill those gaps, and to provide the most comprehensive and holistic support as possible. We also use it as an opportunity to kind of push partners to think differently about the work so that they're really meeting their needs. So this is the list of our advisory committee members. If you don't mind, I might call a couple of you out. We got Chuck here, if you want to say hello. Former mayor of the city of Louisville, Adina Salazar, former executive director of our center up in Longmont, and Deb Gardner, who was on our advisory committee and then recently switched roles and is actually now working with us as at the foundation to help coordinate information. And as you'll see, other of these folks are members of the community. They're deeply engaged in the very grassroots organizing that's happening around collective rebuild efforts. They're former members of city planning departments. They understand permitting, et cetera, et cetera. Our goal was to be as diverse in thought, but also as proximate to the community that was affected without them being in conflict. Does that make sense? These folks, I will say, these folks have been incredible advocates. And again, it's advocacy that's coming from listening to what's happening in community and also listening to what we're hearing from our friends at Marshall together in Superior Rising. Next slide. Okay, so many of you may have seen these figures before, but I think it bears repeating. So in the first 90 days, our foundation has allocated $8.1 million. We have done our research, and I have not found another community foundation, another philanthropic response that has moved this quickly. You certainly do not see the amount of direct financial assistance that we provided at the Disaster Assistance Center anywhere else. Normal fire response, normal response after a disaster like this, you get a $500 gift card from the Red Cross, and good luck to you. We thought that was unacceptable. If you remember, well, of course you remember, I'm sorry to say that. You know, fire struck on a Thursday. Friday was a bank holiday. We had Saturday and Sunday, and then we were on site on Monday. We had banks, and I will give credit, Flatirons Bank and BOK, I can never remember, Bank of Oklahoma, maybe? I always think of them as, they move mountains. So just to name that it took a lot of folks to be able to have us be on site, handwriting checks to make sure that you guys had what you needed to put, you know, first and last month on an apartment or buy your kids, whatever they needed to get to school the next day. And we knew that it was unacceptable for $500 to be like what people were getting in the aftermath of this, particularly given how much we'd raised at that point. I will tell you again, in the philanthropic world, when we tell people we did this, they think we're nuts. Because at the time, we'd only raised $9 million. And we basically allocated more than half of that in less than 72 hours. But we thought it was the right thing to do, and we hope that you felt that. So we still have, we'll talk about this, the light blue, a little bit later in the conversation. Next slide. So what did that immediate support look like? So many of you, again, hopefully many of you were recipients of the initial $5.5 million that was allocated to households that were directly affected, either homes that were damaged or destroyed. At the time, all we knew was the number of households. And so we estimated, okay, if you're a household of 1 to 2 people, $2,500, maybe that will get you somewhere. And if you're a household of 3 or more, 5,000, you've got dependents, we still don't have a full count of the number of people. There isn't a census. We'll get to that later. 90% of fire-affected households per the county assessor's list received funding from this. So we're glad that you took advantage of that funding. We hoped it would help to incentivize you to come to the Disaster Assistance Center and get connected to all of the different resources that were available there. And it was certainly something we thought was important to do right away. We also recognize that a lot of people were affected who didn't live in the community but worked in the community. Either their businesses were destroyed or damaged, or they were closed due to water issues. There's still a number of businesses that are closed. So we wanted to make sure that workers and folks who are also part of our community, even if they don't live here, receive some financial support. So that funding was made available pretty quickly. Rita mentioned United Policyholders. So again, we've had so much fire experience as a foundation. We knew the first thing, I think it was a week right after the fire, we called up our friends now at United Policyholders and said, hey, how quickly can you get here and how much it's going to take? Here's what we know. And so hopefully if you have not connected with United Policyholders, please do. It's not just webinars that they're offering. You can speak to someone who can help you squeeze every dollar out of your insurance claim. They will tell you how to file the claim so that you get the most amount of money out of it. It's a really incredible resource. We will continue to support them as long as you need that support. But I've heard nothing but really positive reactions, responses from people who have accessed those supports. And so please call them, talk to them. They're available. Their materials are here as well. And then mental health supports. I mean, we knew, again, we've had so much of these experiences. We know that this is a trauma. This is a trauma, both individually and collectively. And it's very hard to process information when you're in a trauma space, right? It's hard to kind of hear it and like make sense of it. And so we said, okay, first of all, gotta make sure the kiddos are taken care of. Like, this is a lot. You know, we were having young people, like really young people, 7, 8-year-olds, raising money by doing hot chocolate stands up in Netherlands because they remember when they were in a fire. And so we wanted to make sure that your kids were taken care of through the most fire affected schools at BBSD. And so I really hope that you're finding that those supports are helpful to your young people. And simultaneously, we also want to make sure you guys take some space to process and sit with each other and say, okay, what did this mean for us, right? What did this mean for us, and how do we process this and move forward? So Boulder Jewish Family Services is offering group sessions here, and I'm looking for my friend at the chamber. Yes, correct? They're still doing group services here? Yes. Okay. So, you know, if you want to come in and meet with other fire survivors, there's nothing better. There's nothing better than EMDR. If you're not familiar with EMDR as a modality, it's eye movement. Thank you. Say it louder. Yes, yes. It is an eye movement therapy that helps to kind of restructure the patterns in our brains. It's been shown to be highly effective with PTSD and with trauma generally. I know how hard it is to say I'm going to take time and like do this for myself. I really, really encourage you all because we've been through so much as a community. This has been a real tough 2 years without this on top of everything. Please, please, please make use of those resources. And then in accordance with the federal designation, there was a number of mobile homes that were also wind affected that were made in uninhabitable due to wind damage. So we want to make sure folks also receive funds there. I will tell you that we received special approval from a couple of our major donors to make that available, because we said, hey, wind damage isn't necessarily fire damage. Our fund is called the Wildfire Fund. Are you guys okay if we do just this much? And they said, yeah, that's fine. Please, these are low-income folks. They have nowhere to live. Like, please, please, please make sure you support them. So I just want to name that's a little bit of an outlier, but we did get special approval from those major funders to be able to do that. Next slide. Okay. There is still support available. There is still support available. I was just looking at an article this morning of a small business owner who's had, enormous amount of costs, and I really hope they've gotten funds from us because those funds are available. So most importantly, the direct financial assistance that's being distributed through Boulder County, there's a deadline to apply for that, which is March 31st. If you fall into any of these categories, renters or homeowners who were displaced due to smoke and ash, anyone whose home was destroyed or damaged, and again, I think we got most folks there, anyone who was evacuated, those who lost the ability to work, tools of the trade. If you were an electrician, if you were a teacher, if you were a nurse, you lost your uniform, if there's funding available for those things. And then anyone with a small local business that was destroyed or damaged, and that includes home businesses. So if you can prove you had a home business, there's funding available to support you as well as all the insurance navigation, mental health supports we already talked about. The other thing I would highlight is immediate basic needs. One of the things that we've heard was concern about renters and people who are particularly low income falling through the cracks. Sister Carmen has been absolutely spectacular in making sure that those resources are available for anyone who needs them. So if you know someone who's really struggling or really kind of in need of basic unmet need, that's housing, transportation, food assistance, Sister Carmen is absolutely providing those supports right now. And we're working very closely with them to make sure they have the resources they need to provide those supports. Now I've lost track of my slides. Okay, next slide. We have absolutely been hearing your stories, and we know they're absolutely heartbreaking. We know how hard this has been for all of you, It has been our #1 concern to make sure that any support that's provided was provided as easily as possible. That's why we went to the DAC. That's why we've tried to make this like one-stop shop wherever and whenever possible. And the reality is there's still not a lot of data out there, right? We don't have a census, as I mentioned earlier, so we know how many households were affected, not necessarily the number of people that were affected. FEMA collected some data that hasn't been shared. We've been trying to get information out of the Division of Insurance for a couple weeks now. That's been delayed. So I'm naming that to say we've been holding on putting a survey out because again, we just have not wanted to add another thing for you all to do in addition to all that you're already doing. But at this point in the process, my sense of urgency is we cannot wait any further. So at the end of this presentation, there'll be a link to a survey. We hope you'll take some time to provide it. I understand and I recognize that it can be painful and uncomfortable to continue to share information, and particularly information that might feel really personal, like income information and things like that. Please know that we will treat this with the utmost care and confidentiality. It's just important for us to have a sense of some of these pieces of information in order to get to some of the next steps of our decision making. Next slide. So if anyone's been on our email list, you may have seen this before, right? Disaster Recovery 101. The reality, and this is really like an infuriating reality for me, but just a reality, disaster support infrastructure does not exist at the local level. Every time a disaster happens, we have to create and recreate that infrastructure. What do I mean by that? The support systems. That's it. There isn't case management. There isn't dedicated groups of people. There is a constellation of folks that might do that. But it just doesn't exist like turnkey, here we go, something happened, we're ready to move on day 2. Federal support for that infrastructure can take months and comes with an unbelievable amount of strings. And so for our community who's been through this a number of times, we know that. And for a lot of folks, they're like, we're not really interested in taking on that burden of the federal support, which just causes delays in the process. The national model in terms of disaster response really relies on nonprofits to take on the burden of supporting people in the aftermath of an event like this. I don't love this model. It does not have great outcomes. We're pushing folks to think differently, to think innovatively, and to make sure that we're looking at the needs of everybody. Because the other thing that the national model does is it predominantly focuses on low income people. And we know that's just not the case in our community. We're different. And we need everybody to have the support that they need, whatever that need might be. So our intent, we have been working diligently with local partners to create a simple, centralized, and human-centered solution to support everyone in our community. I mentioned earlier that there's potential, state funds that might come through. We want to give you guys a one-stop shop. Make it as easy as possible on you rather than adding another layer. We will if we have to, because if it takes any longer, frankly, my head's going to explode. Not kidding. I was in 2 meetings today where my head almost did explode. If it takes any longer, we'll do it ourselves. But my hope is that we can create something that gives you navigation support and legal support and all of the things that I know you're all trying to navigate on your own right now. And we frankly don't think it's fair that you have to navigate those on your own. Next slide. So the moment you've all been waiting for. As of this morning, we've raised approximately $38.3 million. That's unprecedented by that as well. Like, it's such a testament to the generosity of our community. It is an incredible testament to the generosity of our region, of our country. People really came through for us. Of that 38.3, as you saw, we've allocated about 8.1. So there's about 30 million left for allocation. We've said since day one, we are looking at immediate, short, and long-term needs. Those long-term needs could be years in the making, but we know enough now to know that the #1 issue that's facing our community is underinsurance costs. And so a couple of weeks ago, our committee and our board agreed to this robust set of supports that include a vast majority of the funding to support rebuilding efforts. So $20 million to support rebuilding efforts. I will remind you again, FEMA estimates on the destruction costs are $500 to $600 million. This is a drop in the bucket, but we hope that it will help to some extent you building the capital stack that's needed to rebuild. And we want to make sure that we're aligning those funds in such a way so that you are not, so that your insurance companies don't negatively affect your claim on that. So I just want you to know the timing of it, the how of it still needs to be figured out, but this is our intent. Our priority, number one, we want you back in your homes as quickly as humanly possible. We also have, again, thanks to the generosity of incredible people, the ability to do both and, right? We can do rebuilding support and we can prioritize the needs of the most vulnerable. That's where you see, and we could probably switch to the next slide, Anna, because that goes into a little bit more detail, right? So up to, and I'm saying up to 20 million because who knows, maybe we raise more money, who knows? Maybe that's not what's needed. Up to 20 million to support rebuilding efforts. There's that 2.5 million to support unmet basic needs for folks that are most vulnerable in our community. Up to 1 million to support this recovery navigation that I mentioned earlier. That's this holistic support system that helps you navigate permitting, debris removal, like every single one of those steps. Do you need to talk to an attorney about your insurance claim? Who do you call? I know right now everyone's probably furiously Googling all these things and asking friends, and we want to make sure that you have some support around that beyond just the mutual aid that you've been experiencing right now. Up to 1 million to assist with smoke and ash remediation. I know that there are a lot of homeowners that have really struggled with getting back into their homes or getting insurance to cover. I know that they've gotten some pretty big bills that seem a little outrageous, but that's where we landed in terms of smoke and ash remediation. 500,000 to support social infrastructure for community resiliency. I can't stress this enough, right? We are collectively in a marathon right now. We're sprinting it. We are sprinting it right now. We're going to slow down. This is a marathon. And we want to make sure that the groups like Superior Rising, like Marshall Together, like the folks in unincorporated Boulder County, we want to celebrate every shovel going in the ground. We want to celebrate every person getting into their home. We want to make sure that we can celebrate the wins throughout all of this so that we can keep our spirits up to get to the finish line. We all agree the finish line is getting folks back home as quickly as possible. Up to 750 to support nonprofits that are assisting with disaster response. We'll see about that. We have up to an additional 750 to support mental health supports. Again, this is a long game. We need to stay strong together. We need to stay strong individually. We want to make sure we provide those supports. And then up to 2 million for debris removal to support those who are underinsured and uninsured. The last thing we want is someone to get a bill from the county for debris removal when they can't afford it, right? So that's, I'm trying to think if I missed anything. Did I miss anything? That adds up to $28.5 million. So of the approximately 30 million that's left, that adds up to 28.5. Now, your next question might be, so how are you going to get us this money? Which is a completely valid and absolutely fair question. And the fact is we don't know yet because we're still working through with our partners to make sure that we can get that one door that you can walk through rather than adding additional layers. If my promise to you, and I will make this promise right now, if there is not a solution by April 15th, we will need to do this ourselves because I feel your urgency and I have that urgency. But I'm going to give our partners and give our community a couple more weeks for us to come to this solution together because we do need us all to get there together. I think this might be the last slide. There's one more slide, but it's about timing and I preempted it. But I preempted it. I think the thing I would like for all of you to know is that we are of and from this community. Our staff are of and from this community. I was, what's the word? Stunned I was stunned and a little gut wrenched to find myself writing checks to people I know as we were sitting at the Disaster Assistance Center. And so this isn't an academic exercise for us. This isn't, this is very, very personal for us as an organization. And we will continue to walk with you throughout the entire process. And I appreciate both your time today, but also your patience and understanding that these things take time. We are 90 days from the day of the event, and our time horizons, years, if not months, if not years. So we wanted to leave a lot of room for Q&A, so I'm stopping there. Any questions? I also want to thank everybody who joined in on Zoom. I hope you could hear us okay. And that, okay, not so great on the Zoom.
Yeah, if you could, for the Q&A.
Yeah.
Stand next to the owl.
Right here?
Yeah, let's see if that helps.
How awkwardly close am I to the owl right now? We're getting up close and personal. Okay. Do we have some questions here in the room, or do we have any questions in the audience? We have questions in the audience. Okay. Other audience.
Give me 1 second.
Sure. Do we need Ben to be mic'd, or do I need to repeat the question? I'll repeat the question.
Please repeat the question.
Yeah. So everyone can hear.
So he's gonna put the questions up on the screen, so you'll be able to see them,
ta-da.
and then you can read and answer those. And then, once we go through some of those, then we'll have an opportunity for some of you in the audience that are here to ask some questions as well. Because we have a whole queue of questions. We've got many, many questions.
Yay. We have plenty of time for questions.
Yeah, we've got a ton of questions, and we also want to make sure that folks in the room, if they do have questions, we get to them as well. Please keep in mind, folks, that there's about 100 questions here. A lot of the questions have already been answered in some way, shape, or form.
Okay.
So we'll do our best to go through them. We've got to read them, post them up, and let Santiana answer them. Any that we don't get to, we're working with a community foundation to try to get answers after the fact. We've got them listed here. We'll do our best to get those posted on our site through Marshall.
I'm gonna quick clarify. If Ben's using the mic, can the people hear him, or is the owl the only thing that's picking up
The owl is what's picking up
for everybody else?
for everybody else.
Okay.
So you should read.
I will repeat what Ben just said. So we have a queue of about 100 questions from folks that are on the Zoom. Some of them have been answered through the presentation. Others require perhaps a more detailed response. And we will work with Marshall Together and Superior Rising and the foundation to get those detailed questions out to people. We will be putting questions up on the screen for folks to see them. There's one, and then we'll go there. Will there be stipulations on receiving funding, i.e. whether a family plans to rebuild or not? The $20 million is specifically for rebuilding homes in the community. Is that clear enough? Okay. With IRS restrictions, can funds be distributed to GoFundMe accounts after the same? Okay. So this is an interesting one. And this has kind of been, I think, an odd misunderstanding. Obviously, we can give funds to individuals. We already gave you funds. And at this point in a disaster response, we need to do what's called a needs assessment, right? This is where the case management comes in, so we can say, okay, there's a need here. That said, we will then be able to pay for services versus giving the funds directly to individuals. Why is that? Anytime a foundation anytime a charitable organization gives money directly to individuals, and I'm getting into a whole bunch of legalese, forgive me, but I want you to know the language so you can look it up later if you're curious. Every time a charitable organization, particularly a foundation, gives dollars directly to individuals, we take on something that's called expenditure responsibility. All that means is that we have to make sure that the money's used for the charitable purpose for which it was intended. So with all love and respect to all of you, if I handed you $10,000 because you said you were going to rebuild your house, and then 6 months from now you realize I can't rebuild my house, and you take that $10,000 and go on a trip to Hawaii, we're in trouble. So we will be more than happy to pay your builder or your permitting fees or whatever it might be that is the need that will get you towards rebuilding. But direct cash is a complicated thing at this point in the process. I actually think it will benefit you that we do that, because then your service providers will be accountable not just to you, but to another entity. Make sense? I see some head nods. Okay. Also, I'm going to say a couple of things about GoFundMe for a second. They're laughing because they've heard me rant about this before. GoFundMe is a for-profit company. I encourage you to look at their administrative fees. They are significantly higher than ours by a factor of 10, I believe. Also, because they are not charitable funds, anyone who is a recipient or a beneficiary of a GoFundMe account, I highly encourage you to speak to a tax attorney, because it is very likely that you will need to report those funds on as income next year. GoFundMe will tell you, nah, don't worry about it. Don't 1099. Please speak to a tax attorney. Don't take it from the folks that are getting the money to give you the money. Because we are a charitable organization, and this has been a declared federal emergency, federal disaster. And within that federal disaster designation was approved individual assistance. Any direct financial assistance that you receive from us is non-taxable. You will not have to declare that, okay? This is why it helps to go through charitable organizations. I got a lot to say about GoFundMe. I'll stop there. What's next? It will pop up here eventually. There it is. Are there plans to help fund specialized, ideally one-on-one tax assistance for fire victims navigate complex tax filing? This speaks to the recovery navigation that we were talking about earlier, making sure that you have a person that can help direct you to additional resources so that you don't have to figure out who to talk to on your own. Yes. So will there be funding to help get you access to those resources? We hope so. We're just trying to work out who's the right entity to hold the recovery navigation. These are easy questions. Oh no, Eric's like, no. Be gentle, Ben. How did we arrive at 100,000 for smoke damage? 1,200 structures were burned, 1,000 more were. So smoke damage is different from damaged and destroyed. So we're specifically on the smoke damage. We're looking at the not houses that were damaged or destroyed, specifically houses that were uninhabitable due to, or still inhabitable, but had smoke and ash damage. And we use the national average, which is somewhere within $25,000 to $5,000. I am fully aware that people are getting like $50,000 bills. Fully aware of that. We base that number on the national average. Again, we need information. We're basing these on estimates at a national average. If we come back and hear from you through the survey, like, heck no, it's way bigger than that, we can do more. We will figure something out. What financial aid options are available to Superior residents who do not qualify for any available resources? So I think in addition to the direct financial assistance that we've already given, there is 2.5 million allocated for unmet basic needs. That includes housing, transportation, food assistance, I believe childcare as well is included in that, and 20 million for rebuilding efforts should folks choose to rebuild their home in their community. That is what we're letting you know today.
Let's do this one. That's coming up next.
Okay, one more question from the Zoom, and then we'll come into the room. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Jen. I answered these two already.
The block grants.
Oh, no, haha. Can the foundation provide block grants to neighborhoods to help those who don't have code upgrades coverage? Bill, okay. There is, if it's not introduced yet, a bill from Senator Fember that will be introduced in the not too distant future, specifically geared at helping with green rebuilding efforts. So again, we've been working with their office to understand like what mechanism they're using to get those funds to people, so that we can try to align as best we can. It may not work. We may have to do something separate, but there is funding that will hopefully, if that bill passes, be available to folks that are specifically around code upgrades. The rebuilding dollars that we are offering will not have restrictions around what kind of, what your rebuilding need costs might be, right? Whatever the costs that are associated with rebuilding, we can provide that flexible funding. That was the last one from.
Well, we've got plenty more.
We'll turn it over to the floor.
Okay,
for a bit.
We'll
So,
turn it over to the floor for a
If
bit.
anybody has a question out here, I'll bring you the mic.
Okay. And I'm gonna repeat your question again, just so that the folks on Zoom can hear us. So, sorry to sound like a parrot.
Hi, thanks for coming today.
Hey.
You indicated that the funding, that the 20 million would only be available for residents who are rebuilding their homes, if I heard you correctly.
Correct.
There are residents that are so dramatically underinsured that they will not have a chance of rebuilding their homes. There are residents that are seniors that in the time permitted will not have a chance of rebuilding their homes. There are people that will never be able to afford to live in Superior or Louisville again because of the rising cost of homes. It feels particularly cruel when you anchor to the fact that the donations were intended to help the people that were most vulnerable, that these three sets of people will not be available to receive the $20 million. Will you reconsider that?
They can hear.
Oh, great. Okay, folks can hear the question off to parrot. One of the questions that's part of the survey right now that you'll get at the end of our conversation today is around whether or not folks plan on rebuilding. I will be interested in seeing what that percentage looks like. What we have heard thus far in the last 90 days is that people want to rebuild and want to stay in place as much as possible. There are, how do I put this? We talked about need, right? In terms of need. It is challenging, and I'm open to any lawyers in the room right now. Cool, let's talk. I'm open to a legal, like helping craft a legal argument for charitable purpose for people to leave our community. We've never seen support provided to people who've chosen to leave a community in the aftermath of an event like this. I'm not against it. We're not against it as a foundation. Again, we're trying to chart new territory here to be holistic and comprehensive, but I'm having a hard time finding a legal argument for charitable purpose. I'm open to it. And again, we'll look at those survey results and see how large of that population might be. But I appreciate your question. It's important. Yes, sir. We're getting your mic.
And I believe that my question, I'm Ted Polinsky, actually, I'm glad to be here. Nice to see you here, and of course, as you can imagine, my house is pile of rubble, small pile of rubble. I thought it'd be more rubble with almost no ashes. As far as that $20 million for rebuilding, and of course, we're planning on rebuilding, and we are, as you mentioned, horribly uninsured, and we were told, hey, well, you have a superior insurance even month after disaster. I talked with our agent who called me a month later after I multiple times called him and said, don't worry. I do not waste everybody's time talking about what is happening, but it's less than a half what you're supposed to get. So I'm trying to find out, and of course, I realize those who have less than us, of course, and I definitely sympathize with them. But what is the major criteria for distribution of those? Because if you divide well evenly, which is not going to happen, so it's like $20,000 per burnt house. But what would be the criteria, or who definitely is not going to be able to have a use of or receive those funds?
Yeah.
Whatever, in whatever amount it could be, yeah.
It's
And
a
if
good-
there is specific limit, maybe.
Great question. We don't know yet.
Thank you.
So, great question, and we don't know yet because it goes back to this point that we don't have a census of this community. We don't know what the average household income is. We don't know what the average time lived in that home is. We don't have some really basic information to help build the criteria for how to prioritize and equitably distribute that $20 million, which is again why we're asking you all. I had held off as long as I could, but we want to move forward. So with the information that we will collect from the survey at the end of the day, we will begin crafting with our advisory committee some of that criteria, and we'll hope to have that public in the next couple of weeks.
Anybody else?
But I will say, I mean, again, I know, I don't know, and I'm not gonna pretend that I can even begin to imagine what that feels like to be in a position where you thought you were insured adequately, and it happens that you're not. It will take every single dime we're gonna be, I mean, it's gonna take every single one of us looking under every single seat cushion for every single penny that we can squeeze out of both insurance, any state funds that come down, our support, SBA loans. If you haven't applied for an SBA loan, please, please, please try to apply. If you did not qualify for an SBA loan, please call Fannie Mae. People forget that Fannie Mae is also an option, particularly folks who may have credit challenges. Please contact Fannie Mae as well. Some people will not want to take on a second mortgage, and I completely understand that. But to the criteria piece, we're working on it. We need your help in terms of getting us some information so we can make those, just get a sense of who the community is. I thought I saw one more hand raised. Yes, sir.
Yeah, my name is David Smith. I'm over in the Berry Down Knolls area by Spanish Hills, which is unincorporated Boulder County. The houses are expensive. So again, I grew up there as a kid, 53 years at the house with multi-generational people going through that. My mom's 92. So again, we're going to rebuild. But again, Boulder County is a total cluster at this point in terms of permitting access. So they finally assigned somebody directly to my mom to manage the chaos. And so again, I'm interviewing builders, interviewing architects, et cetera, et cetera. But the big thing is infrastructure. Right now, the Berry Down Knolls is a dead end. Spanish Hills the same way. Public service just gouged the hell out of the roadways. And so right now, Boulder County, when I talked to them today, we don't have any money in the budget to do asphalting. We're not good at it. So they said, basically, you're on your own to fix the public road. So there's things that I think you guys could do legally with that money to go after these entities that say that, well, we can only do so much. No, they need to do a lot more. And so that's my challenge to you, is that make it to where you're using your foundation more than just to fix little things. Get the thing rolling. Right now, I was on the FEMA Boulder County mitigation process. And then after the lawsuit, I basically said, no, this is a total cluster. I'm going to go find a private mitigator. So right now there's 5 different mitigators mitigating 10 houses in my neighborhood. I'm paying extra. I'd like to get some of the money. So again, can I contact you and give you a bill and say, this is the bill I got and this is what the State Farm's paying for? Are you going to give me the extra money now? Because that's what I'm paying for it now.
Yeah, it may take a little bit. It may take a little bit of time before we can do that, but that is the goal for.
That's not a good enough answer. You need to think about it now. This is mitigation now. And think about DRC when they start mitigating this whole chaos. Right now, these mitigators are taking anywhere from 10 to 30 days to mitigate 1 acre lots. Think about Sagamore or McCaslin. I mean, right now, you guys should be trying to coordinate Boulder County with what you can help Boulder County do to be a better county. I mean, DRC, I talked to a couple of guys that were actually in my neighborhood, and they said that Superior is actually stalling them on that fenced area on McCaslin to put their equipment on there, let alone there's no equipment per se. And they're not letting them put their RVs for these contract workers, to put them anywhere to live while they're mitigating. So again, this is where it's a bigger picture than just your foundation.
Agreed.
You need to step up a little bit.
Well, I completely agree with, it's a much bigger picture than our foundation. And we've certainly been working with every single one of those partners that you've named to push and get us to think holistically and comprehensively. I mean, this is a multi-jurisdiction event, the largest fire in Colorado's history, and it may come as a surprise. And it doesn't feel that way because every day has felt like a month. We are moving very, very quickly in this community. And that's good news because it means that we're all trying to row in the same direction. I value you sharing it. We will continue to advocate. And we're not government. Other questions in the room? One up there?
And then after we can, yeah, why don't you go ahead and answer that and then we'll come over here.
Yep. Oh, so what about losses not covered by insurance, for example, automotive and general specialty tools? So the general specialty tools, that falls under tools of the trade. There is funding available for that. Application deadline is March 31st. Please, 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 please apply for those supports. That is available currently right now. Automotive, we have not heard as being not an insurance covered need, especially if that automotive was on the site. But if that is the case, we can, again, we can look, needs will continue to arise. We will likely need to continue to fundraise as needs arise. I will tell you right now, we wanted to make sure that you all were very aware that our number one goal is to prioritize rebuilding efforts to the extent to which we can, right? With the limited, frankly, funds that we have. And I'm personally worried about what happens if it takes longer than 18 months to rebuild these houses. Your ALE runs out. Then what? I'm already thinking 18 months in the future in terms of what additional funds we might need to raise to support you at that point. But please know, it is absolutely a marathon. One more question in the room. Yes, sir.
So I'm finding myself in kind of a unique situation. Apparently there aren't many people that are in a partial burn situation. And everyone I've talked to has a lot of advice for people who their homes are fully burnt to the ground. I've been unable to find answers and get expertise and get questions answered. I've called the insurance commission multiple times, county, city.
Yeah.
I've called everyone that I can think of, attorneys, and no one really has any protocol for how to deal with a partial burn. And my house is uninhabitable,
Yeah.
but you know, it's not a full burn situation, so the laws don't apply. The standards don't apply, and I've gotten nowhere.
Yeah, I'm really sorry to hear that, and I'm really sorry you're experiencing that. Rebuilding, so the 20 million we're allocating to rebuilding is for damaged or destroyed, right? So that would be funding that would be available for you in a partial burn situation. And our hope is, again, with recovery navigators, that you would have an advocate so that you're not having to make those calls on your own. I'm going to use the analogy. What we learned in the aftermath of the King Super shooting is that when you are a victim of a violent crime, you're given, it's built into the system. You're given an advocate because it is understood. You've been through a traumatic event. There's a whole lot of systems you have to navigate, and there's someone there who will help you walk through that process. That is not true for a disaster response, even though the traumas are not dissimilar. And so we are really pushing hard to use that model in this event so that you do not find yourself in the situation that you find yourself in now where you're getting a runaround and there isn't somebody who's advocating on your behalf.
If I can just add, hi,
Hi,
in the meantime, for you,
Yeah.
there are two folks in the back of the room that are in exactly the same situation as you. And so it might be helpful to just, if nothing else, commiserating with them, but to connect with each other. It's Renee and John, and they both work with Superior Rising. So hopefully you can meet them afterwards. Anyway, thanks.
Thank you, Jen. No, I appreciate that. So second question, there is some concern that money will be spent towards efforts that do not directly impact the cost to rebuild. How can admin costs be kept to a minimum? So in the allocation that you saw earlier, we are very clearly separating out infrastructure costs, like the cost of the recovery navigators, from direct financial support, to be very transparent. Like, this is infrastructure, or if you want to call it admin, this is infrastructure, this is direct financial support. I didn't do the math on what the percentage is, but I think it's pretty low if we're looking at less than 2 million of a $40 million fund. What's the math on that? Someone will do the percentage on that for me. Huh? 5%. Yeah, still less than GoFundMe. Not that I have a problem with GoFundMe. Other questions? You all have been so incredibly patient. These are all really great questions. Thank you. Others in the room? Or others on the Zoom, I should say? Are property owners that lost a rental property eligible for any financial relief, funding, grants, et cetera? Yes. That is part of the lost livelihoods support that is currently available. So if you had a rental property, there is, I think, up to $2,500 that you can get right now through Boulder County. That application is online. Please apply by March 31st. Yes, ma'am. Oh, the second one. On the community level, can funds be used to replace the wood fences that were the cause of many home lives? Folks, we will never get this prescriptive. So the question is around, like, can we replace wood fences and versus metal or stone fencing? The joy of philanthropic support is that it is not as restrictive as any of the funding that you will get from any other places. When we say we're going to put 20 million towards rebuilding, you will make choices on what that rebuild looks like for each of your homes. We're not going to dictate one way or another. Okay? We'll likely need to use an average cost per square foot just to keep things consistent. So your cost per square foot may be higher than what our average is. Your cost per square foot might be lower than the average is, depending on how you approach your rebuild. I highly encourage folks who are in who were in planned communities to take advantage of the idea of a collective rebuild. It will bring costs down for everyone. We've got to get innovative together. But to this question, we will never get this prescriptive. I hope that helps. Other questions, or else I think John's going to close this out.
I have a question.
Yes, please, Raina.
I know somebody's going to ask this down the line. How are people to apply for these funds down the line?
Yeah, so thank you, Raina, for that question. Could folks hear it? Super. So how will people apply for these funds? Again, we are trying our darndest to make this as streamlined of a process as possible. If I had a magic wand and could say tomorrow, recovery navigators are your one-stop shop, you will meet with them, they will direct you to all of the different ways that you can get supports, including access to our funding, access to state funding. That would be my ideal situation. Is that going to happen? I don't know yet, but I hope to know in the next couple of weeks. If needed, for the sense of urgency, we will consider doing it directly, just because it's taken a little longer than I certainly would like it to. And as Ben knows, because he saw me on calls very, very early on, my face was turning red, I think, on some of our conversations around just moving faster. We need to move faster, but we are moving quickly as our community. And I really think it's a credit to everyone that we have been moving this quickly. Yes.
Santiana, you might share with this group the email for the community foundation where they can send personal emails and get a response.
Oh,
Because that's part of the
100%.
frustration that I'm sensing, is that we need to have, and I know community foundation is responding.
Yeah.
And responding in a personal way without
Yes.
hitting just some,
Yeah, we are.
maybe gibberish, but hopefully it's personalized gibberish.
Yeah, we're human beings and we're here and we're absolutely happy to answer any questions you may have. Which one are we using, Eric? Info?
Send up the info is good, communications is good.
Yeah, let's go with info. So info at comfound, that's COMMFOUND.org. I'll repeat it, info at COMMFOUND.org. And we're responding within about what, 24, 48 hours at the latest? That's why Eric looks very tired.
Yeah.
Yeah,
If we're
yeah.
trying, I mean, that's what we're, you know,
Yeah.
sometimes if there's a lot coming in at once, it might take a little bit, but we'll write every single person back.
Absolutely will. We will absolutely provide that because we care. I mean, this is our community and I regret it's taken this long for us to get together, but I'm glad that we did today. And I hope this helped alleviate some of the questions you had in terms of how the funds might be used moving forward. I know there's still some unanswered questions. And we, again, could really use your help in filling out the survey and helping share it with friends. So are we ready? Well, no, John's going to close us out.
Couple of questions. Do you have plans for a public announcement for tomorrow?
No, so, no, because press is already here. So cat's out of the bag. I think folks, you know, this will probably be public. I think it might be public before the end of the evening. We've certainly spoken with some media folks earlier today, so.
Will these slides be made available to people?
Yeah, I have to.
Yeah, if you want.
Yeah.
And certainly the allocations and the descriptions of those, we'll make sure we get those distributed tomorrow.
Okay, so I'll repeat that for folks who are on the Zoom. So we mentioned at the top of the meeting that we're recording this. We'll make sure that that recording is available through the couple of different channels that you all have together. So for folks who weren't able to attend tonight or weren't able to attend the Zoom, they can come back and watch this, and we'll also make those slides available to you. Helpful?
Very much so. I have a lot of questions. I didn't put it into the slide. You talked a bit about, you know, how we are in a process still, right? So, and I think you actually said April 15th, not just for tax day, that if, you know, by April 15th, we'll have this thing organized one way or the other.
I sure hope so.
So here we are putting pressure on ourselves. How will people hear about the progress that is being made?
Yeah.
Is there a better way for us to stay connected with what Community Foundation is doing?
Yeah, 100%. I would say if you're not part of our email list, please join the email list. And we have been sending communications fairly regularly and have highlighted some of these concerns around like setting up the infrastructure. And we will continue to work with partners here who you are already connected with to make sure we're getting the word out as broadly as possible. So if you don't want to be a part of another mailing list, by all means, we'll let Superior Rising and Marshall together now. You can get on the email list on our website. It's www.comfound.org.
Any more questions? Really, you're not on a tight timeline. It can keep on going if anybody has anything else. If not, I want to call back one of the goals that Raina had when she was talking about her goals for tonight, which is to kind of understand the spirit by which the monies that have been raised within the Community Foundation will be distributed. And I feel like, from my perspective, that goal has been met. Raina, I feel like the spirit is in a good place. I look at that pie chart you put up there and just the complexity by which all of our recovery has to follow, right? There's the number of things that we all need to be thinking about. Each of us have our own priorities and those are incredibly important and we need to keep our focus there. We've got our family, all of our well-beings in mind, but we also know how many others are hurt through this. And I'm sure you've all told stories to others, you know, saying, look, I've been impacted immensely, but I know of others who are similarly even more impacted. And that's, I think, a part of who we are. in our area, and other community that we have. And we all want to see these funds distributed in a way that are honoring all of those needs that our community has. Something that I've said from the very beginning out of this whole process is that we live in an area with just amazing resources, amazing community, amazing people, amazing capabilities. And I think what you're seeing here, and by the way, I was one of those who did not raise his hand when Santiana asked who had already heard of the Community Foundation. I had not, until actually I got a phone call saying, come back down to the Disaster Assistance Center and pick up a check. Which I was literally ashamed to do, right? It's like what I'm not used to receiving checks, which is also something that is a bit of who we are. But this foundation, which, what I've learned over these several weeks, just getting to know what you all have been doing, it's amazing the resource the foundation is. But of course, the foundation is a reflection of our community. It's a reflection of the people who were donating. And if you heard one of the statistics Santiana put out there was that 90% of the folks who were impacted directly have received funds from those first funds that were distributed. Well, that 10%, a lot of those weren't people who just didn't show up. They were people who were contacted and said, look, I know I've been very impacted, but I actually want to give more money back. And they did not take those funds, they put more money into the foundation. That's the sort of community we have here. So we are incredibly fortunate. We know this. It doesn't take the sting away from every morning waking up and having to deal with what's in front of us again, the uncertainties. But the community can, right? Community foundation, two pieces of that word. This foundation has got a lot of resources, but it's based on community. And the community is the people and is the connections that we all can make together. I know every one of you knows people you didn't know before this event happened. And every one of you are strengthening those relationships because we're all going through this together. I want to thank you, Santiana, for just coming in and having the heart to try to do the hard work to teach people like us about charitable purpose. I'm still not sure what that exactly is. There are a lot of things here. Yeah, we got a lot of work to do. I mean, the organizations that really reflect the communities here, I think are doing what we can, but the city of Louisville, Boulder County, town of Superior, the state, and I mean, the federal government is going to fund a huge chunk of this work here. I mean, there's a lot of money coming into this area. And so we all need to just kind of keep our eyes up as far as the appreciation we can have. But we also, this is a journey we're walking down together. And I welcome the fact that you're welcoming us into that journey. And we'll hold ourselves accountable as we go down the path. So thanks so much for everybody coming in here and talking.
Thank you, John. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you. I'll stick around if you were shy and didn't want to ask a question publicly. So.